Friday night, ninth guest, 8 seats. The moment I stepped into that gilded dining room, the temperature dropped 5 degrees, but not from the air conditioning. It was the kind of cold that doesn't hit your skin, but your rib cage, the kind of cold you get when your wife doesn't turn to greet you, not even a glance, just keeps chatting with her friends like I was the sommelier. I stood there, gift bag in one hand, nothing flashy, just a leather-bound vintage wine journal I knew Madeline had been hunting for, and stared at the table, 8 chairs, all of them taken or claimed by the careful placement of napkins and handbags. 9 people invited. I did the math. Twice, one of her friends, Chase's wife, I think, the one with the laugh like an empty can being kicked downstairs, looked up, gave me a faux sympathetic smile, and said, "Maybe try the diner down the block, sweetie." Cue the light, polished laughter, like it had been rehearsed. 'Cause of course it had. I didn't say anything. I just placed the gift bag beside my wife's chair. She didn't even stop mid-sentence and walked toward the front of the restaurant. Polished floors, velvet-lined hostess podium, an orchid that probably cost more than a used Honda. The manager was there. Young guy, nervous eyes, knew me by name but always avoided mine. Safe assumption he'd been told I was just her husband. "Can you bring out the chair from my office?" I asked, calm as a lake. He blinked like I'd spoken in code. Of course, Mr. Hale." See, I've always believed there's a specific flavor of silence that follows a statement like that. Not confusion, not recognition, just a faint static of discomfort as a few minds slowly piece things together and others pretend they didn't hear anything at all. I turned around, walked back to the table. Still no open seat, still no apology, just the same superficial smiles, only now slightly tighter. The wine kept flowing, but the conversation had slowed. My wife was laughing a little too loudly at something Chase said. Her hand grazed his forearm. I noted it, filed it away, didn't flinch. Behind me, 2 staff wheeled out a chair, not one of the restaurant's light minimalist ones. No, this was dark oak, high back, curved arms. My office chair, the one from the private room behind the wine cellar, the one no guest had ever seen in this dining space. The manager helped position it, head of the table. I took my time lowering myself into it, straightened my blazer, unfolded my napkin. No one said a word. Then the sommelier appeared, like a magician with perfect timing. No menu, no prompting. He uncorked a 1995 Chateau Margaux and poured me the first glass. I let the wine breathe, tilted it slowly, and said, "Shall we begin?" My wife finally turned her head, finally looked at me, her lips parted. "You own this place?" I met her gaze even. "I do. I'm glad you all enjoy it." I let that settle in, let it marinate. 1 heartbeat, 2, then sipped the wine. Perfect, as always. Some of them tried to laugh, some coughed, one checked her phone like she needed to mentally step out. Chase's smirk twitched into something less certain. And for the record, yes, I noticed. Over 97% of you listen and read and come here without following. But this story, it's just beginning. And it's stories like this that keep our team sharpening the knives. So if you want more, if you're the type that notices the missing chair before the wine's even poured, hit that follow. It matters more than you think. Back at the table, the temperature kept dropping. They didn't know where this was going, and neither did she, but I did. It's amazing how fast a room changes when someone sits where they're not supposed to and makes it look like they belong. The chair made a sound as it touched down, solid, dragging, no attempt to hide its weight. It was the only chair in the room not designed for comfort. It was designed for command. The manager himself wiped the arms before backing away like he'd just set the crown on a king's head. I didn't rush. I let the moment expand, straightened my cuffs, rolled my shoulders once before lowering myself into it. No one spoke. Not right away. A few of them glanced at each other, searching for cues like actors in a scene that had gone off script. The one who'd told me to try the diner, Jenna, that was her name, smirked again, but it was a nervous tick now. Her eyes darted to her husband like maybe he'd explain what the hell was happening. He didn't. He just took a long sip of his wine. I unfolded my napkin with the deliberate elegance of someone who had all the time in the world, smoothed it across my lap, rested my hands on the dark oak arms of the chair. Then I spoke, quietly, clearly, with no need to raise my voice. "Shall we begin?" It wasn't a question. It was a detonation. Marla, my wife, blinked hard, like she was seeing something that couldn't possibly be real. She looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time in months. Her jaw tightened. You own this place? I nodded once. I do. I'm glad you all enjoy it. She stared at me like I'd just told her I was fluent in Mandarin and had faked the last decade of our marriage. Which, funny enough, isn't far from the truth. Before anyone could recover, the sommelier approached. Again, no one summoned him. He glided toward me with the confidence of a man who'd poured for me many times before. He presented the bottle like a rare jewel, Chateau Margaux 95, from my private collection, not on the wine list, not even in the cellar. I'd brought it in personally. He poured only for me, not even a glance at the rest of the table. That was the second shift. I swirled the glass slowly, letting the wine breathe while I let the silence thicken. Good choice, I said, and the table fractured, not visibly, not loudly, but I saw it. The way their bodies angled away from Marla slightly, like someone had set off a silent alarm. They weren't sure what to make of me, but they were suddenly very sure of what she hadn't told them. Wait, said Jenna's husband, Evan, I think, trying to play it light. You're not serious? You own this restaurant? I glanced at him. I named it. Does that count? A pause. That's your last name, isn't it? Hale. I nodded, then pointed to the napkin. Embroidered, tiny, classy, Hale and Ember. Jenna coughed into her wine. Evan rubbed the back of his neck like he'd been slapped in the dark. I let the moment breathe. That's the thing about silence. It only scares the people who need noise to stay relevant. Marla finally found her voice. You've never mentioned this. I turned to her smiling. I've never mentioned a lot of things. Doesn't mean I don't notice. She blinked and blinked again. There it was, confusion bending toward unease, because if I'd kept this secret, what else had I kept? What else did I know? They didn't realize it yet, but I hadn't just joined their dinner. I'd taken the head seat at a table built on borrowed status, a table that only existed because people like me had chosen to fund their illusions. And now, here I was, reminding them that the real currency wasn't clout, it was ownership, and I owned this entire room. The clinking of glasses resumed first. It always does. People are addicted to performance. If they're not clapping, they're pretending they weren't just exposed. The laughter that followed was brittle, fragile as sugar glass. They tried to stitch the evening back together with light jokes and Pinot Grigio, but the seams had already split. The thread was mine now, and I wasn't handing back the needle. Someone cracked a joke about Michelin stars. I didn't laugh, just tilted my glass slightly, watching the deep red arc along the rim. One of the guests, some marketing executive with a tailored suit and no real spine, complimented the foie gras. I nodded, sourced it myself. Silence. He smiled, confused. You mean you picked it from a menu? No, I said, placing the glass down. I mean, I flew to Gers last October and chose the farm, sampled the feed, spoke to the family that raises the ducks. I liked their philosophy. He didn't know where to file that information. You could see it on his face, like watching a computer buffer mid-task. Across the table, Marla stiffened. She hated this side of me, the part that didn't ask for permission to speak, the part that reminded her I built more in silence than her entire circle had shouting from rooftops. She always assumed I didn't talk because I had nothing to say. Turns out, I just had no reason to share my playbook with people who only borrowed ambition for the night. Someone else leaned in, Chase, of course, always sniffing for angles. So, how long have you been involved with Hale and Ember? I folded my hands, looked at him like I was deciding whether to peel his ego now or save it for dessert, since before the name was on the lease. He blinked. Oh. That was it, just oh. The kind of syllable men say when they realize the pecking order isn't what they thought, and they're much lower than they assumed. The waitress came by, asked if everything was to our liking. I thanked her by name. She smiled, real and warm, and called me Mr. Hale before disappearing again. The way Jenna looked after her, like she'd just seen a servant kiss a king's hand, was almost funny. Marla stood abruptly. Excuse me, restroom. Her voice was steady, but I saw it. The flicker, not guilt, fear. It passed through her like a shiver, barely noticeable, but unmistakable if you knew where to look. I watched her walk away, her posture stiff, heels clicking like punctuation marks. She didn't look back. Good. I preferred to watch people leave when they still thought they had the upper hand. It made the next act more satisfying. The table tried to recover. Evan muttered something about investing in hospitality ventures. Jenna elbowed him under the table like she could scold away the awkwardness. I didn't bite. Instead, I let silence return, thick and slow. I sipped my wine, let the moment stretch just long enough to make them squirm. Because the truth is, when you stop performing for people, they don't know what to do with you, especially the ones who need you quiet to stay loud. By the time Marla returned, her face was calm again, but her lipstick had been redone, her hands washed too thoroughly. She looked composed, like a woman who had just spent 5 full minutes trying to rewrite the last 15. I stood, briefly, gestured to her chair. She paused half a second too long before sitting. "Everything all right?" I asked, voice even. "Of course," she said. She didn't ask me any questions. She didn't need to. She knew. They all did. And that was the most dangerous part of the night. They knew I was holding the knife, but they had no idea where or when I planned to cut. She sat down like she was lowering herself onto a landmine, too carefully, too aware. The muscles in her shoulders were tight, trying to play off grace but shaped by tension. Her wine glass was full. Someone must have filled it while she was away. I watched her fingers circle the stem, spinning it like a dial that might take her somewhere else if she turned it long enough. I remained standing for a second longer, just enough to remind her whose chair I sat in. Then I gestured toward her seat. "Everything all right?" I asked casually, like we were still playing nice. She nodded too quickly. "Of course." The lie hit the table like an extra place setting. Unwelcome. Obvious. I leaned in slightly, just enough that no one else could hear me. "Didn't expect me to show up tonight, did you?" She let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh. "You never cared about these events." "I cared enough to fund them." Her jaw moved, clenching once before relaxing. She looked past me toward the wine display like it would offer an exit. It didn't. Her voice dropped, low and tight. "Can we talk later?" I smiled, slow and sharp. "That depends. Will I still be your husband by then?" There it was. The flicker again, bigger this time. More than just fear, it was recognition. Not of who I was, she'd long forgotten that, but of what I could do now that I'd stopped pretending to be harmless. She didn't respond right away, just stared at her wine like it might swallow her whole. Around us, the table babbled on, Evan still fumbling through some story about a failed ski trip, Jenna laughing in clipped bursts like she couldn't quite tell if we were the joke or the threat. Marla straightened her back. "Why now?" she said finally. That was rich. "You mean why speak up now?" I replied, swirling my glass. She nodded once. I leaned back in the heavy oak chair. "Because silence is expensive, and frankly, I'm done paying for everyone else's performances." "You think this is about money?" she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "No," I said. "I think this is about you playing queen in a kingdom you didn't build, surrounded by jesters who think I'm the servant. And I let it happen. For years." She narrowed her eyes. "You're making a scene." I raised a brow. "Am I?" Because from where I sat, I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't thrown anything. I hadn't even touched the stake. But the hierarchy had shifted, and she knew it. Everyone at the table knew it. And no one, not even the loudest ones, had dared to reset it. The waiter approached with the main course, set the plate in front of me first. Perfectly seared duck breast, caramelized fennel, blood orange reduction. One of my signature dishes, a silent reminder. I didn't look away from her, just picked up my knife. "I asked for this to be on the menu tonight," I said, sliding the blade through the duck like butter. "Figured it was fitting." "What is that supposed to mean?" she hissed. I popped a bite in my mouth, chewed, swallowed. "Nothing, just thought it was time someone else felt cut into." That was the moment I saw it, her hand, trembling just slightly as she brought the wine glass to her lips. The panic she was trying to drown one sip at a time, not rage, not even betrayal, just pure, undiluted loss of control. And that's when I knew we weren't married anymore. Not in the way that mattered. She wore the ring, she had the last name, but I'd stopped being hers the second she mistook silence for permission. Now, I was just passing through, making sure she felt what it was like to be on the outside of something she thought she ruled, and I was far from done. So, Jenna chirped, too brightly, like she was flipping to a new chapter mid-disaster, what do you actually do? I could have laughed. She said it like I was an intern at my own event, like a man only became real once they could define him by function. I took a sip of wine, let the silence stretch, just enough to let her feel how condescending the question actually was, then placed the glass back on the table. Real estate, I said. A few restaurants. Private holdings. Jenna blinked, her smile freezing mid-performance. Wait, she said, tilting her head. You're the Hale? Like Hale Hospitality? I didn't nod, didn't grin, just gave her a quiet, tired look. I am. There was a rustle of movement at the table, chairs shifting. Wine paused mid-pour. Even the steak knife Chase was wielding suddenly looked a little ridiculous in his hand. That name carried weight, more than they expected, more than Marla ever admitted in these circles. Across from me, one of the husbands, Greg maybe, wore loafers with tassels, called himself an investment advisor, but couldn't manage his own cholesterol, sat up straighter. I could feel the wheels spinning in his skull. We've actually been trying to reach out to your office, he said with the world's fakest grin. Some exciting investment opportunities. Small world, huh? I looked him dead in the eye, smiled just as politely. And yet, I kept hearing your name in tax lien circles. There it was. Impact, clean, sharp, not shouted, just slid across the table like a polite paper cut. His face froze mid-smile. Jenna's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Even Marla's fingers clenched around her napkin under the table like she was trying not to flinch. Oh, Greg said finally, his tone suddenly lacking vitamins. Well, you know how the game goes. Just a few things in transition. Of course, I said. We all have chapters we'd rather not see printed. I let that hang. Across from me, Chase leaned back like he was trying to get smaller. His firm had once sent feelers to buy a property in my portfolio, sent a junior to try and dig leverage on me. The offer was insulting. I never responded, but I remembered. Now I watched him squirm in his expensive shirt. It fit too tight around the collar. Shame always adds weight. I sipped my wine again. No one spoke. You could almost hear the collective realization passing around like a virus. He's not just part of the restaurant. He is the reason we're here. The man we laughed at, the man we dismissed, the man who never raised his voice. He'd been writing checks in silence while they wrote each other into imaginary status. So, I said, tilting my head just slightly, anyone else been trying to reach out to my office? Evan laughed nervously. Chase cleared his throat. Jenna muttered something about the bathroom. Marla? She just stared at her plate. Still. Quiet. And for the first time all night, smaller than I'd ever seen her. That was the thing about power. It doesn't show up in volume. It walks in quietly, pulls out its own chair, and starts asking questions you'd hoped no one would remember. And now that I had the table's attention, I had no intention of letting it go. Chase leaned forward, trying to recover what little dignity he had left. His voice carried that fake casual tone rich guys use when they're bluffing a hand with only a 7 in their pocket. This feels performative, he said, smirking, but his eyes flicked nervously to Marla like he needed backup and wasn't getting it. I tilted my head. Does it? He shrugged. I mean, this whole dramatic entrance, the chair, the wine, the little reveals. It's theatrical, man. I let the silence bite down hard on that one. Then I picked up my napkin, folded it calmly, and placed it on the table. Your firm bid on this space, didn't it? The smirk died. Chase blinked. How do you even know that? I read the offer myself, I said, standing slowly. Well, skimmed it. It was full of buzzwords and very little actual capital. He swallowed. You outbid us. No, I said, looking him square in the eye. I paid cash. There it was. I let that hang in the air for a beat longer than polite. He looked like someone had pulled the bones out of his posture. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. Jenna stopped pretending her salad was interesting. Even the waiter in the corner froze mid-step like he knew this was a moment best witnessed still. I adjusted my jacket cuffs. You all built an entire image around access, I said slowly, letting the words hit each of them like coins in a tin bucket. Proximity, rubbing shoulders, playing like you belonged in rooms you begged to enter. I glanced at Marla. Meanwhile, I said, I was just investing. No gloating, no raised voice, just the math of it. And math doesn't beg for applause. I looked around the table, at the trembling wine glasses, the pride punctured under polished veneers, the hunger for validation now served cold. I used to watch these dinners, I added, the whispered alliances, the insecure toasts, the passive-aggressive compliments. It was fascinating. Like a play that thought it was real life. I stepped away from my chair. Well, I said, enjoy the rest of your meal? There was a confused pause, as if they didn't understand what I meant. Or maybe they did. They just couldn't believe I was walking out. It's on the house, I added, and then after 2 steps, turned back one last time. Just not on my house anymore. Chase's brows furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled. It means I'm selling. Marla's face turned white. You're what? She said. Unloading the property portfolio, I said, including this place. Too many ghosts around here. Jenna blinked. Wait, but where will we? I raised a hand, silencing the question without needing to answer it. No more free dinners. No more comped wine, no more status by association. The fantasy had expired, and I had just ripped the veil off. And as I made my way to the exit, walking past tables of strangers who didn't know they'd just witnessed a quiet war, I could feel it behind me, the crack forming, not just in their relationships. In their hierarchy, I hadn't just removed myself from the table. I'd pulled the whole damn rug with me. She followed me out into the night like she was chasing a secret, not a man. Her heels clacked behind me, furious and uneven. I didn't stop walking until I reached the sidewalk. Let the cold air hit. Let the facade peel with the steam of the city drains. You embarrassed them, she snapped. I turned slowly, hands in my coat pockets. Calm. No, I said, they did that themselves. Marla's hair was perfectly in place as always, but her voice trembled now. You think that was necessary? The chair, the wine, the comments? I stepped closer, just enough that she had to tip her chin to keep eye contact. You mean, was it necessary to remind a room full of clout chasers that they've been eating from a table they never earned? Yeah, it was. She exhaled hard, nostrils flaring. What are you doing, Elliot? I tilted my head. What I should have done a long time ago. Her eyes flicked over my shoulder back toward the restaurant, probably wondering who saw us walk out, whether Chase would spin this into a story tomorrow, or if Jenna would post something cryptic and venomous on her fake inspirational Instagram account. Why now? She hissed. I funded every trip, I said, voice low, even. Every gala you bragged about, every overpriced coat you loaned to friends who called me a loser the second my back was turned. She opened her mouth, closed it. You never said anything. I was busy, I said, working, building something real, something that could last. You didn't have to work so much. No, I interrupted. I had to stay out of your way. That's what you meant. You wanted space to audition for people who still think I don't belong. Even after tonight, I'm still just the husband. That's the role, right? Silent benefactor, wallet and slacks. She stepped back half a foot. The metaphor hit too clean. That's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not, but it is accurate. Marla's voice softened, just enough to imply she was pivoting to damage control. This isn't you. You've never... What? I cut in. Spoken? Pushed back? Owned the damn oxygen in the room? She looked wounded, but not in the way you bleed when someone cuts too deep. No, this was the wound of being seen, unmasked. You change, she whispered. No, I said, you just never bothered to learn who I was in the first place. Silence. Not the quiet kind either. The kind that expands like a dropped wine glass in slow motion. The kind that wraps around your neck before it shatters. She crossed her arms, but not from cold. It was defense now. There was nothing left to hide behind, not her friends, not her image, not the restaurant. I thought we were happy, she said quietly. No, I replied. You thought I was happy. Big difference. Another beat, she glanced away. So what now? You walk away? I'm not walking, I said. I'm done carrying. That landed. She flinched, just barely, but enough. I gave you everything, I added, and you kept asking for more. More status, more parties, more people I had to pretend mattered. And what did you want? She shot back. I shrugged. Respect would have been a start. There was no victory in her eyes now, no fire, just realization, cold, ugly, the kind that scrapes behind the teeth when you try to swallow pride that's past its expiration date. The mask was gone, not just mine, hers too, and with it, the marriage we'd been pretending to have. The tears came fast once the silence stayed. They weren't performative, the kind she used in boardrooms or during forced reconciliations with her sisters. These were quieter, real, maybe even involuntary. Her mascara hadn't budged yet, but the tremble in her lower lip betrayed the years of polished detachment. I thought you didn't want attention, she whispered, voice cracking like dry wood. I thought you were happy in the background. I looked at her and, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger, just the dull ache that comes when someone finally admits they never really saw you at all. I was happy supporting someone who respected me, I said. You stopped doing that years ago. She looked down, the tears gathering like shame at the corners of her lashes. I let the moment breathe, let it sting the way it was supposed to. You never said you were unhappy, she said, almost like a child, like saying it out loud would have given her a chance to pretend it didn't count. No, I said. I said it plenty. You just heard it as silence because it wasn't broadcast on social media. She stepped forward, not close enough to touch me, not this time, but close enough to try. Can we fix this? She asked. Please. Her voice was small now, all the altitude she'd lived in, all the high society breathlessness gone, just a woman on a sidewalk at the edge of a life she assumed was invincible. I reached into my jacket. Her breath caught. It wasn't a gesture she expected, or maybe it was, and the possibility scared her more than the answer. I pulled out the envelope, thick off-white, tucked with precision, nothing messy. I held it out. She didn't move to take it at first. Then she did. She looked down at it. No need to open it. She knew. The color drained from her face, not in shock, not in horror, in recognition. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Don't worry, I said, voice calm, almost kind. The lawyer's already been paid. It'll be discreet, no headlines, no drama, just signatures. Her fingers shook as she held the envelope. She didn't even try to fake defiance. That part of her had collapsed somewhere between the duck confit and my final line at the table. I don't want to lose you, she said, barely audible. I nodded. You did, long before tonight. The streetlights buzzed. Somewhere nearby a cab honked. The world kept moving as it always does when something breaks. Loud and indifferent, she stood there with the envelope like it might catch fire. I didn't look back as I walked away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I'd already mourned it. Every quiet insult, every backhanded compliment she thought I didn't catch. Every time I watched her perform love like it was an audition for someone richer, louder, newer. I didn't need closure. I was the closure. By 9 o'clock a.m., the first text had already hit my old number. Jenna, of course. Crazy night. Let's talk soon. It was followed by a champagne emoji, like she hadn't spent the past 3 years treating me like the valet who came with her friend's marriage. 20 minutes later came Greg's email, dressed in faux professionalism. Had a few thoughts about cross-collab potentials, maybe breakfast next week. I didn't respond. Neither did my assistant. He already knew not to forward anything with the word collab. By noon, 6 of them had reached out, not one mentioned Marla. The social circle didn't just crack, it folded in on itself like a badly dealt poker hand. The fake alliances, the carefully curated brunch cliques, the strategic event invites, it all collapsed overnight. They'd built their kingdom on a foundation of borrowed power, and now that it was gone, they had to reckon with the fact that the emperor wasn't just real, like he'd been paying the wine bill all along. I walked the restaurant floor around 2 o'clock p.m. Sunlight cut through the tall windows, making everything feel clean, new. The smell of citrus polish and fresh linen replaced the perfume and deception stench from the night before. My new general manager, Lila, paced beside me, iPad in hand, already 10 steps ahead of every detail. She'd only been promoted 2 weeks ago, an internal move, someone I trusted, someone who didn't flinch when I said we were gutting the guest list. There's already a wait list, she said, scrolling. How long? For Fridays? She raised an eyebrow. Through next month. I nodded. Good. Let's clear out the old comp list. She smirked. You want it archived? No, I said. Delete it. No more VIP for anyone from last night. She tapped the screen. Done. We passed table 8. the one they'd all gathered around. It had already been reset, fresh linens, polished glasses, a new arrangement of tulips in a steel vase, no sign of spilled egos or cold duck, just a clean slate. I looked toward the host stand. The reservation screen glowed faintly. My name wasn't on it. Why isn't my seat listed? Lila shrugged. You never booked under it. Label it, I said. Owner, not for sale. She paused, glanced at me. You sure? I am. She entered it without another word. It wasn't about the chair, or the name, or the menu. It was about space, the space I no longer gave away to people who'd spend the meal picking apart the flavor while ignoring the hands that made it possible. No more pretending. No more letting people feed off the quiet man in the corner and then laugh about him at dinner parties afterward. They wanted status? Let them earn it. As I walked back toward the kitchen, a couple stopped me near the bar. Young, maybe late 20s, clearly dressed up for something important. Is this your place, Kide? The woman asked, eyes wide. I nodded. Her partner leaned in. We tried booking, but were told there was no way unless we knew the owner. You just met him, I said. They laughed, thinking it was a joke. I smiled, then moved on. Didn't leave my name. Didn't offer a table. They'd figure it out eventually. You don't get to sit with kings after mocking their silence. Not in my house, not anymore. Late evening, last seating. The restaurant buzzed with that perfect, hushed warmth only the truly content understand. Laughter that didn't demand attention. Conversations that didn't revolve around currency or connections. Just people eating, existing, enjoying. No performances. At table 8, that table, a new couple sat. Fresh-faced, earnest. They didn't carry themselves like they belonged to anything but each other. No designer watches, no loud jewelry. The woman's heels were scuffed. The man kept adjusting his cuff like it wasn't his usual suit, real in the way wealth pretends to be. He stood halfway through dessert, nervous, jittery, then knelt. The box was modest. No giant rock, no gas from the crowd, just her hand to her mouth, the tremble in her laugh, the whisper, yes. The room clapped, not in choreographed unity, in human celebration. I watched from the corner booth, whiskey in hand. No food, no company, just me, the glass, and the window beside me fogging from the heat of the room. The sommelier approached, towel draped over his arm, not intruding, just stepping into the quiet with me. Back in the saddle? He asked, tilting his head toward the couple. I smiled faintly, eyes still on them. No, just watching what love looks like before it's traded for status. He said nothing, just nodded once and left, understanding what most people never do. The loudest victories aren't won in front of an audience. I downed the last of the whiskey, let it burn, not painfully, cleanly. Then I stood, slid my coat on, didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't offer notes to the chef, didn't adjust the playlist or give direction, just walked through the hallway toward the rear exit, the same one the kitchen staff used. No lights, no spectacle. The cold air outside was bracing, honest. I didn't look back, not at the building, not at the table, not at what was lost or what was taken or what had been rebuilt in its place. That part of my life didn't end with rage or betrayal. It ended with me, coat collar turned up, disappearing into the night. Not defeated, not victorious, just done. And finally, free.